Hello there, and welcome to another session solving tactics on chesstempo.com with the Advocate. This set we're doing 1500 to 1600 problems. If this is not within the range of your field of study, please choose another set. There are many of them. So if you want to study 1400, 1500, 1300, 1400, go ahead and look for that session. 1600 to 1600 isn't done yet, 1700 isn't done yet, so you'll have to hold off for a little bit. Let's go ahead and get started. Two rooks, two rooks, two rooks, two minors, one minor. If you take here, you take here, he takes here, that's equality. Not really, because you're down pawns. But I think if you take here, king takes g2, and then promote to queen, that should be enough. Mistakes that are made in this position are it's not the first move. People almost always get rook takes g2 check, but they don't see promotion and they play rook takes f4 or g takes f4. But you have to see that after bishop here, rook takes, you are going to struggle really hard to maintain a draw. I think this is lost. How did I solve this problem? I looked at this capture, it's the automatic recapture, and then I realized that my rook would be hanging. So I decided to take the rook with check and then take here. But then I realized that after counting, this was equality. So I didn't settle on equality and I looked for something more, and I noticed my b-pawn about to queen. So I decided on queening, but then if you queen, rook takes here. So I decided to change the move order and keep rook takes g2 check in the position, then queen. That way you queen without losing, how to say it? You queen while keeping the maximum amount of your material on the board. By the way, this is Petrosian with the white pieces. Tigran Petrosian, master of prophylaxis. Next problem. White to move. There is this pin here, of course. Here, I mean. But I'm wondering if trying to get the queen is more strong. For example, rook b7, rook takes b7, pawn takes b7. And the knight can't stop it. So after rook b7, rook c8, a7, rook a8, bishop here. That's winning. However, It seems very long for a tactic. What about bishop e6, threatening to win the knight? Or what about c4, threatening bishop d1, checkmate? Or what about rook takes, pawn takes, and then bishop e6, is that checkmate? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. That's very nice. So rook takes here. Any move is checkmate in this position. The king has nowhere to go here. The king has nowhere to go here, here, or here. So this is cut off, this is cut off, this is cut off. The king's practically in stalemate, so all you need to do is deliver a check. And this check also just happens to cover the newly liberated f5 square. Mistakes that are made in this position, c4. c4, yes, that's what I was talking about. c4 liberating the d1 square to deliver mate. But this can be covered, of course. There are many ways to cover it. You can play f4. Now bishop check, king f4 is fine. King f5 is fine. Another mistake that is made in this position is bishop d5. Yeah, that was one of the moves that I considered as well. But this is just a pawn win at the end of the day. Although promotion is going to come. Rook b7 and promotion is definitely going to come. How did I solve this position? Because of my previous problem with the promotion tactics, I think it was natural to first look at promoting the a-pawn. And I did decide that that was winning. However, I decided that it was way too long of a variation. Just for example, the computer actually has it here as an alternative, a7. And the point is, wait a second. You can play a7 immediately? I guess you can. People who play a7 immediately don't play a7 immediately with the knowledge of what the computer is playing here. Because a7 immediately fails to rook a7. Of course, this mate is still on. Pawn takes, bishop check. But if the mate is still on, just play the mate and don't push a7. So people who are pushing a7 don't see that the rook can just take on a7. So if you want to promote the pawn, you got to play rook b7. That's some cart before the horse kind of stuff. Okay, bishop e6, another mistake that is made. And this is, yes, this is an... So I decided that promotion was going to take too long, so I started looking for other moves, ways to win the rook, or ways to give mate. Looking at the rook win, trying to win this knight, led me to trying to win the knight outright, led me to the idea that this would be a check, and then it would be checkmate. Actually, I think first I decided c4 check, trying to deliver the mate there, but then I realized I could clean it out by force, clear it out by force. Okay, bishop on the long diagonal. You want to play something like g6, but after f6, pawn takes f6, bishop takes f6, this queen covers the 7th rank. So let's look at other ways to get in the position. For example, queen takes h7 check. Queen takes h7 check, king takes h7, rook h3 check, king g8, rook h8 mate. There are no blocking moves, so let's go for it. Mistakes that are made in this position, queen h6 is by far the most common mistake, which is totally normal. This is a totally normal mistake to make, because after f6, you think, oh, I'm going to get through, but you're not. Computer's line goes queen h6 here, rook h3 threatening mate. The queen covers the 7th rank. Your attack continues, of course, but it's not mate. Okay, what I'd like to do here is to deliver some kind of smothered mate. I see knight check, pawn takes, and then queen h6 will mate. Yeah, so knight check and pawn takes is forced. He doesn't even have the opportunity to sidestep and give up the queen or something. It's just mate. "30 wrong moves that are made in this position. Knight f2 check. Knight f2 check, king g1, double check, check. There's just nothing happening here, and if white wants to avoid the perpetual, you can avoid the perpetual. Something like this. Or I wonder if this is... Nah. So yeah, you don't play this tactic for a perpetual. I think the exchange down here, I guess. 2 rooks, 2 minors. So yeah, you are the exchange down. So you need to either perpetual or mate. And knight f2 check leads to a perpetual, but knight g3 check leads to mate. And that's how I solved this problem. I solved this problem by looking at alternative checks with the knight. Queen takes d5. I think I can win the knight on d7. Rook d1. Knight here. Rook d1, queen here. Knight here. Let's say knight here. Queen here, and then h3 should be the last straw. If queen e6, I take on e6. Pawn takes, and then I take on a d7. So rook d1. I have no hanging pieces, so she can't counterattack. If rook d1, knight here, I can take on e6. Although I think first I would take here, so that way there's no revealed check, pawn takes, and then queen takes d1. Yeah. So I would play rook d1. If knight d4, knight takes first. That way there's no knight check winning the rook on d1. It would be knight f3 check, winning the rook on d1 with the queen. And just messing up my pawn structure in general. After queen takes d1, I would have to play something nasty like king g2 to secure the f3 pawn. There's a pin here. Anyways, so rook d1, knight here. I'm not going to take on e7. First I take knight. First I take with the knight, then pawn takes, then queen e7. Now let's say rook e8, and I just run away. Looks good. Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking at. So now rook e8, and I can run away here, hitting the d4 pawn, or here, hitting the d4 pawn. So he wants me to take, and then check, then queen here, rook takes, queen takes, king takes, and that's equality. But I could take here. No. Or I could take here with check. Rook takes. Take here with check. Rook takes. If rook takes here, rook check. Queen back. Rook takes check, king takes, and then knight takes c5. I'm down a piece. Am I? Am I down a piece there? Rook takes here, rook takes here. One rook, two minors, two queens. So rook takes. Rook check, queen here. Now rook takes f8, king takes f8. I have won a rook, so I'm two minors and a rook against two minors. Then he plays knight takes c6, and I'm up the exchange. That looks good. The difference between these two variations is that in the first variation, the rook captures on e8, and in the second variation, the rook does not. So then when the queen comes to f8, black isn't returning material, or white isn't returning material, he's giving me material when he takes the queen. Now obviously if queen takes, I'm just going to play knight d3 and be a clean piece up. Queen can't take here because I'll just take it. Rook takes check. Nah, there's no even check. There's not. I take with check. So anyway, rook takes e1 check. Rook takes here. Queen back. Take, and then knight here, and I'm up the exchange. Good problem. I like that one. Next problem will be my last one. Rook takes b4. Common mistake. Rook takes b4. You're down a piece here. I think I mentioned this. I mentioned this in the calculation. So rook takes b4, loses a piece by force. Another mistake that is made is knight takes d3. But knight takes d3, queen takes here. If rook check, rook takes, knight takes, queen takes b8. You don't have enough material here for the queen. How did I solve this problem? All of these mistakes, rook takes b4 and knight takes b3, I examined, knight takes d3 rather. I examined both of these moves. I even tried to get knight takes d3 to work with some sort of mating attack after picking up. For example, if knight takes d3, I was imagining that there might be some sort of mating attack if queen takes d6, but it's just not the case. It just doesn't work. So this led me to look at other moves, quite simply. Oh, I've just noticed that if this, you don't take with the rook, you take with the knight. This led me to look at other moves. So when I decided that this didn't work and this didn't work, I tried to get this move order to work somehow and came up with the realization that if you take on e1 first and then take here, you're winning a rook when the queen comes back to f8. In the midst of all this calculation, I did realize I was dropping the knight on c5, so I had to make certain I was still up material by the end of that variation. Then it was just a simple matter of confirming whether or not there were any more winning moves in the position, and I couldn't find anything, so that's what I went with. Next problem, last problem. So if I take here, this will be equality. Take here, bishop takes here. I'll be the exchange up. But I feel like queen takes here is just super strong. Or a bishop takes here, rather. Bishop takes here. There's no queen check, because if the queen checks, I'll just take it with my bishop. With check. And I'm threatening bishop h6 checkmate. So how does he defend against bishop takes f8? You know I want to play something like queen here, bishop h6, rook check. But I don't see that working for a couple of reasons. First of all, there's much nonsense to be played. Bref. So queen takes here. I don't like it. Bishop takes f8. It just seems to be the healthy and solid move. Bishop takes f8. Threatening checkmate, threatening the queen. The queen has no check. So queen takes there, and then I take here. "19 wrong moves in this position." Queen takes e5, most common mistake. Yeah, definitely. Queen takes e5, bishop takes here, rook check, bishop back. And you're the exchange up. No doubt about it. You are the exchange up. But the game's not over. And it's not as winning as other variants. Queen takes e5, another mistake that's made in this position. Rook a7. Rook a7 gives up the game, so it fails the quiet move test, right? And the quiet move test is don't get mated. Rook takes c7, king g3, rook check. If king to the back rank, then queen c1 will mate. So for example, king f1, queen f2 mate. If king g1, queen c1 mate. And if king g3, queen h5 mate. So rook a7 fails the quiet move test. How did I solve this problem? First of all, by dismissing rook a7 and things like this. You know, you look at the quiet moves and you determine, actually you don't look at the quiet moves. When I look at a position, I don't say, what quiet moves are available in this position? What I actually do is I look at my king safety and determine what quiet moves will or will not be possible in this position. Now, the only quiet moves that are going to be remotely helpful are going to be with the rook on a2, but if the rook leaves the second rank, I can see that there's going to be some kind of mating attack. I don't need to calculate out the mate. All I need to do is see that it's dangerous. So apparently rook a8 is an alternative. So I sort of dismissed the quiet move, although apparently rook a8 gets the job done a little bit. And decided between queen takes e5 and bishop takes f8. I had to decide between those moves, so I examined first queen takes e5, and then after bishop here I couldn't see a good continuation to the attack. So I was automatically attracted to bishop takes f8. And it's a very attractive move for many reasons. If the queen goes anywhere, it's checkmate. After the queen gives herself up, obviously. And if the queen gives this check, I'm going to take. So the queen must take back, but then I win the rook here. And I'm a rook up. That was how I solved that position. There are, of course, follow-up threats like queen e4 hitting the a8 square, threatening to pin the queen to the king. There's lots of good stuff in that position. All right, good session. I hope you enjoyed doing this with me. I hope it taught you something. I hope you learned something here, and you will hear me next time. Until then, good luck with your chess journey, and we'll do some more 1500 to 1600 in the next session. Take care for now.